Welcome to Nasdaq TradeTalks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq. Joining me for this segment, we have Mark Beccue, Head of Artificial Intelligence at Futurum Group, to discuss how enterprises should be thinking about sorting through the generative AI stack. It is great to have you with us, Mark. Welcome to Trade Talks.
Thanks, Jill. Nice to be here.
You got it. And let's talk about that, enterprises and how they should be thinking about the extensive Gen AI tech stack, particularly about data that they might not be or might not have migrated to the cloud yet.
Yeah, so I think one of the big things to remember for everyone is that we're really at the beginning of this. So much innovation and experimentation, and what's happening is the enterprises are thinking about where their data is, how they want to leverage it. And remember that some folks have it in the cloud, some don't. A lot of data is very proprietary, needs high security. So you've got a lot of enterprises that are thinking about, what do I have when I have on-prem, types of data storage, and how do I access that? So that's really a challenge they're thinking about, how to work through that and get at it, really, because the compute tends to be either in the cloud with our big hyperscalers, or you got to go buy it yourself.
I also want to talk about, and I would say this is even beyond enterprises as well, but what about some of the IP copyright concerns that are associated with Gen AI?
Yeah, we've been noting, if you follow the AI Act, which is really going to be one of the biggest regulatory piece moving forward for now, kind of setting the trend. As that's moving through the system, many of the countries, individual countries within the EU, are pushing back around copyright and IP. It makes sense, will the coverages that you have for copyright and IP really handle and take care of what you're doing with generative AI? And the answer is they're not sure. Here in the States, we've got a lot of movement around things where folks are pushing back or thinking about protections. I'll give you one example. Adobe has proposed what they call the FAIR Act, where you would have some protections for people who generate creative things from Adobe, and whether they're protected or not. You'll have a lot of people talking about indemnification, and that's going forward with a lot of the innovators.
And speaking of Adobe, we're seeing some of the earliest generative AI applications navigate as commercial products, but you're also noting new apps from OpenText as an example. What are some of the new apps that you're looking at?
Well, what's interesting there is, the early stage has been, let's build some tools for enterprises to experiment. And then on the other hand, you had Adobe, you had OpenText, and a few others. But what they announced last week I thought was interesting, where they said they had these very specific agents that they call aviators. And some of them are very specifically focused. For instance, one is for, solving service tickets. And, so that is one of those ideas where, enterprises aren't going to have to think so much about what do I have to do with this. It just does something better that that company did before. So I thought that was a great idea, coming out finally with more kind of purpose-driven assistance, which was a good example.
Right. And Mark, one area we know where enterprises struggle, let's say cybersecurity is an example, there's just so many vendors across the tech stack, right? Do you think that could potentially be the case with the generative AI as well, where there's just such a proliferation of products and it adds another complexity of layers to the stack?
Well, that's really good, Jill, but I think where we're headed is this idea that what's at the core of all this is how enterprises and vendors and all sorts of folks deal with these LLMs, or what's called foundation models. And what we really think is going to happen is, over time, those will be commoditized in a way, right? So what happens is, how do companies leverage those LLMs and those foundation models through their own data? So you think that we're circle back, which you started the whole conversation was about this data. How do you use it, right, to have a competitive advantage? That's the only thing that you have that's really a competitive advantage, is your own data.
All right, Mark, we appreciate the insight. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.